So again, I'd just like to welcome everyone to the final presentation in this year's Building the Future series of public talks sponsored by the Victoria Baha'i Community. And for those of you who have been fortunate enough to attend one or more of them, these talks have presented really interesting and thought-provoking ideas based on Baha'i perspectives of where an ever-advancing society, as we are, where we're going to and where we're heading at the personal and the collective level of experience. So tonight it is my great pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Edward Epp. Edward's been a practicing artist for more than 40 years, and I think I've known him for more than 40 years as well. I don't know if that ages me and or Edward, but whatever. And has taught art in post-secondary institutions in Liberia, Botswana, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. He's also a professional counselor. Community, arts, and spiritual values, challenging patterns of addiction, tonight's talk, was developed across disciplines, drawing on professional and life experience, as well as the influence of Baha'i teachings. In Edward's own words, if artistic ventures contribute as service to individuals and to the community, that would make me feel that they had achieved a high level of success. In my own life, in addition to exhibiting in many public and commercial galleries, working with community service projects for youth in BC, such as Nights Alive in Prince Rupert, and with art-centered healing projects with youth in Masset, Tiklata, Malahat, Halalt, and Penelakut. So in addition to being an accomplished artist and therapist, Edward, as I've mentioned, whom I've known for a very long time, is an all-around great guy, and he has a really delightful sense of humor. So please welcome Edward Epp.
Thank you, Valerie. It's an honor to be at this gathering. I assumed there'd be about 3 people, so I wasn't prepared for a large group like this, a distinguished group. So anyhow, that's okay. I presented, or Leanne, who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, my partner who is a long time writer, poet, and academician now. She completed her PhD at the Simon Fraser University in a program on diversities, and in a special program that SFU created a number of years ago. She was very attracted to the concept of that program on diversities and decided when she wanted to go back and get a PhD that was the one that sounded from her spiritual ear to be in the right direction, to focus on diversities as a strength and how to use those diversities within a classroom framework. And she completed her PhD. It almost seemed effortless from my perspective to carry her back and forth to BC Ferries, and she commuted from Shawnigan Lake to did all her work and was actually able to read articles and write things on the BC Ferries. Don't know how she does it, because I still have a very hard time doing that myself when I was trying to get ready for this talk today on BC Ferries. But anyhow, she is teaching 3 courses. They just sort of fell into her lap, and so she had to prepare this weekend and just to teach us one of the classes is the SFU course in the program in education on her subject, her specialty, and then 2 are English courses with a Kwantlen College. So she wanted me to express her regrets for not being able to be here. And I also was going to mention that we had, when we were living on Vancouver Island in Shawnigan Lake, we had done some work collaboratively, and we had done this a number of times over our life together in terms of sharing ideas in art and writing and working with groups. And one of the things that we had the privilege of doing was while I was working for 2.5 years with the Halayton Health Society, is that we worked with Tom Halleck, who's now he's the manager of human resources for Halayton Health Society, and he's a very generous soul. If you had a chance to meet him, I hope you will. He's a lot of fun. And he likes the Boston Bruins, so he's always in a problem within his community. On that basis, it started many kind of a conflict. But anyhow, that aside, he was a great person to encourage Leanne and I to offer almost on whatever, how much we would have wanted, but it turned out to be about every 2 or 3 weeks. On Saturday afternoons, we would use the health center in Malahat, and we had this idea of using both creative writing and also use painting. And we just invited people in the community to come to this event at the health center. And actually, that's where some of the slides are that we'll have a chance to view. And the majority of the other slides are from, especially during my time with the Halayton Health Society. The first one, for example, is working with another colleague who was a teacher, still works in Penelakut. And what I was doing was using art in this beautiful setting and incorporating, trying to weave it into the life of the community. And so it was trying to incorporate my experience as an artist and as a clinician, as someone who's experienced a little bit of life, and try to do what I could to do in terms of trying to, try to create conditions for some sort of healing in that community. So that's my introduction. I had that all written down. No, I didn't. Anyhow, let's look at a couple slides, and then I will read some things that I had written for this presentation. We first made this presentation in 2011 at the Baha'i Studies Conference in San Francisco. And when I offered to make a presentation, I was thinking about what I could say, and I realized that was our actual practical experience of trying to address some of the current themes within our experience of first of all, as Baha'is, and trying to understand the profound revelation as we understood it, and trying to incorporate within our own life experience. We had spent time in Africa and Liberia and Botswana, where both our kids were born. And then we had spent a lot of time in northern British Columbia, Leanne working as a professor for 18 years with Northwest Community College in both Prince Rupert and Terrace, and myself as an artist. And we thought, up to this point, this is how we had found ways to explain our rationale, our theories, and our kind of insights in terms of both, what the inspiration of the Baha'i teachings were for us and hopefully for humanity, and also, of course, our own personal professional backgrounds. And so this is where that paper was written. So a lot of the language is I think, created from Leanne and her kind of recent studies. I guess you could say a lot of it's a very postmodern kind of language, using words like tools, which is nothing scary, it just means that it's like poetry, it's just another way of kind of managing issues and thoughts and concerns. And there's something about postmodernism. When I first saw postmodernism as an artist, I wasn't very much favor of it, because it seemed to not always be that aesthetically beautiful, because it seemed full of a lot of verbiage. But when I discovered it, when I studied counseling, I found it extremely enlightening and very, very useful and very creative. I still don't understand it all, but we don't have 2 hours to talk about that. But anyhow, this is where this is coming from. So let's look at a few slides. These first group are from Penelakut, I believe. I guess I have to make the one. Sorry. God almighty, I thought someone would work for me. Anyhow, this is in Penelakut. Every Tuesday, I worked with my colleague, a fine person who was a teacher working in adult education, and we decided that we would support each other. We were, I guess, what's the word we use? Not advocates, accompaniment. We were accompanying each other. And we were supporting each other because we both felt that we were sincere, we were trying to make a difference in the community, and it was daunting. The task was daunting indeed. And so we recognized each other as plus we both enjoyed each other's personalities and our skill sets. We learned from each other. Okay, this is just one of these Tuesday afternoon or morning workshops. So we had an open studio, I guess, in Penelakut every Tuesday, and so these were some of these photographs were done. Okay, this is another event, and I'll send some of these books around later, but one of the, on National Addiction Awareness Week, there was a special event, and we participated. In the first year, I was invited to kind of do something with 80 people in one of the motels in Duncan. And so again, I think I got Leanne to help, and we did a little bit of writing and a little bit of art, and we kind of asked some questions about addictions. And so that's where so people were writing out, we had a question that we asked people to meditate about and then to kind of respond from their own thoughts and with idea, just any kind of images that they came up with. So some of the thoughts in terms of inquiry about the subject in the community. And just some of the tools, very simple tools. Good quality, but just very basic watercolors and charcoal and paper. And this is it's just a little pastel that I did on MP3 board, very thin board. And the reason I put that in there is that sometimes what I was experimenting with in doing counseling is I work sometimes with groups, sometimes I work with individuals. And in this particular case, I had a client that I met almost weekly. And I found that sometimes clients respond better when we both, if I want him to do something, to draw, I found that if I did some drawing with him, in this case it was a him, that he would feel that we were kind of doing something together. So this is my participation. And I started that working up in Masset, and I did it for a number of years. It seemed to be very effective. Not always with everyone, but it just seemed to. Some of these problems that I think we were having a conversation, are challenging, and that is really helpful sometimes just to think in terms of that. Okay. Yeah, I put in this quote. I hope it's okay for me to read it. God has created all, and all are his children. Some are imperfect, they must be perfected. The ignorant must be taught, the sick healed, the sleepers awakened. The child must not be oppressed or censored because it is undeveloped. It must be patiently trained. The sick must not be neglected because they are alien. Nay, rather, we must have compassion upon them and bring them healing. From Abdul Baha. What a beautiful quote. And I don't know, I was asking myself when I saw it, I said, maybe people will think that I'm working in First Nations communities, that I'm thinking of my clients in those communities in those ways, and I hasten to add, not at all. I'm probably thinking more about myself than my clients, but because I think on every side of the spectrum, the continuum, we all have places of healing and strengths, and we all have places that we need to be improved upon and learning from. And sometimes there's a lot of ironies in life, I suspect. Living in Africa and in the First Nations communities where I have such respect for the pools of potential within those communities. And if we could become more and more skilled at unity, we probably would assist each other more, I think. But this is a group of clients, I hope you don't mind the fact that I'm showing you my clientele. They are, I just request that you think of it in terms of being very gentle and respectful. As I said before, it's a continuum of being healed and healing. And I'm showing you the people that I work with, and this is a group of people that I've worked with in Kitimat. I still fly into Kitimat. I was there yesterday, and I work as a counselor. And for 10 years now, I was contracted to facilitate the aftercare group. And when we first started the aftercare group, it just means that people have been to treatment centers for addictions. And at that time, believe me, the world has changed a lot in 10 years. But at that point, a lot of the people, when it was still Alcan, and it was a major employer, but a lot of the people who went to treatment centers were going to Edgewood or Cedars on Vancouver Island. And so part of their request for me at that point was to assist in healing, is that an aftercare program seemed to be necessary for people to kind of maintain their possibility of healing. So anyhow, that was the group that I worked with. This is another slide that I put in because when we lived in Prince Rupert, in the last city that we lived in when we lived in northern BC, before moving to Vancouver Island, 2008 or 9, I had an incredibly beautiful space or office that I rented, and this is a counseling office, and we also ended up creating a space where we had devotional meetings, and again, Leanne took the lead in terms of getting involved with the project, and she made chanting kind of a major element of the devotionals. And they became very, very, it was a wonderful endeavor. And so that just reminds me of that space. And this is the space that we use. Okay, back to Penelakut. So the tools. What are the tools? If you don't mind, I'll read. The tools are the techniques, the materials, and new transformative ideas, blending art experience, discursive counseling skills, and non-discursive, or no-talk therapy, ones with Baha'i inspiration, using art in First Nation settings, enacting from Baha'i sources social actions in one of the, again from the Baha'i text, myriad social spaces. The focus is on capacity development through appropriately designed tasks, complementing size and challenge of the individual or group. The quality of discourse is a strong component for healing, humility, collaborative learning, and exploiting arts media to facilitate therapeutic conversations where, again, I'm reading from Baha'i inspiration text from 2010. Discrete actions are placed in a context, and the smallest of steps is endowed with meaning. As a healer and an artist, every nuance, for example, discussions of even the most seeming mundane daily detail, as with each tonal and color shift in painting, is pregnant with potential. Hence the importance of intense and careful preparation, both inwardly and outwardly. Both prayer for love, as well as seeing the operational features, including lessons, materials, and spaces, all take on special significance in these daily sessions. These are quotes from the Baha'i sources. Social action seeks to apply the teachings and principles of the faith to improve some aspect of the social or economic life of the population, however modestly. Such endeavors are distinguished then by their stated purpose to promote the material well-being of the population, in addition to its spiritual welfare. Again, from 2010, House of Justice. Capacity rises to new levels, of course, as the protagonists of social change learn to apply with increasing effectiveness elements of the Hallows Revelation, together with the contents and methods of science in their social reality. I was reading these quotes again and thinking that was such one that again just spoke to me with such force. About one of the central principles of the Baha'i teachings is the science and religion are in total agreement and must work hand in hand. And I think that implies so much. And science doesn't always mean test tubes. That's science. That's a kind of science. But science could also be postmodernism, or it could be concurrent thinking on any kind of therapy, or even art could be a kind of science. It's a way of kind of examining our reality and being kind of reflective of the effectiveness of our learning. Okay, a few more quotes here, and that I used when I made this presentation a number of years ago. It gives rise to a conversation between two souls, a conversation distinguished by the depth of understanding achieved and the nature of the relationship established. Again, that was from 2010. Okay, one more quote. What is more, everywhere, a notable number of friends find themselves ready to enter into conversations with people of varied backgrounds and interests, and to undertake with them an exploration of reality that gives rise to a shared understanding of the exigencies of this period in human history and the means for addressing them. And I had already alluded to in my own comments this quote from the House of Justice: discrete actions are placed in context. Even the smallest of steps is endowed with meaning. The operation of spiritual forces in the arena of service becomes increasingly apparent, and bonds of friendship, so vital to a healthy pattern of growth, are continuously reinforced. And there's one other quote which I won't read again, but it's just this talks about this concept of myriad social spaces, how there are many social spaces, and to discover these social spaces is a place to carry forward learning. Sometimes that could be in theater, because I was in Kitimat yesterday, and I keep in touch with the friends in Terrace. We used to live in Terrace, and years and years ago we started doing things called Utter Film, called Utter Fest, and it's kind of alternative theater, and it has it's in 1 year. A number of people in our community, including Baxter Houston, Deanne Boschman, co-wrote a play and offered it in Utterfest and actually got an award. And Baxter rewrote the play, gathered together a new group of actors, and got someone else to direct. And he presented last night at a festival in Terrace. And there were 3 plays that were being presented, and 2 of them were both written in Terrace, his and another person's, and they had there was a guest from the person who was the director of the Stanley Theatre was there as a kind of adjudicator. And some of the comments she made were so interesting. She really applaud their courage to write that. So anyhow, I'm just giving that as an example from my own personal experiences of this space, these myriad spaces where over time you can create discourses and talk about issues that concern individuals. Some more photos from little art shows that we put on, like this is my friend in Penelakut, and the great work that we produced together. These are some of the artists. We featured some of the artists in the community. Bill Jack. This is Bill. He's a delightful painter. So one of his paintings. And you just sit down and you just kind of generate these images that are so creative, so delightful. Hummingbird. Metallic. It's another one of the artists. Such delightful images, obviously alluding to the landscape, and then these whales, I guess, and within the ovoid. Watercolors, pastels, acrylics, landscape. It's beautiful. It's like Paul Klee. It's very, very abstract. It's one of the we've honored and featured all the artists and, gave them the respect due to any artist. And some of these events that we publicized and went into public. So we'll quote about, alluding to no-talk therapy. Therapy with no-talk kids or client proceeds like life of the center out, not the reverse. There are many combinations of reasons and barriers that lead the child or adolescent away from deep conversation with therapists. Until we have a firm grasp on the core meaning of the silence, we will not be helpful. The initial weeks of therapy may contain the seeds of later work, but our primary focus needs to remain on the therapeutic relationship. Our essential task is doing the no-talk kid on her unique development therapy. Sorry about that. Joining with the no-talk kid on her unique developmental therapy. I thought that was a kind of an elegant way to describe the thinking about that particular approach. It was a rational. It was one of the books that I found that kind of explained what I intuitively felt was working in when I had used art in a healing way. Does that kind of relate? We were talking before about working with the kids. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. We were chatting about, you had a question, I thought it was a really great question, about how to assist children and what's the rationale of art was. It's very simple art materials. It's just, again, very thin MP3. Is that what's, it's not MP3, it's just K3 board, I think. It's just very light mill. And I just put gesso on it, and different colored chesses at a surface, and pastels. This is from, I'm leaping all over the place, forgive me, but this is from an exhibit that we visited. Our kids were spending a couple of years studying in New York. We visited them at, there was a beautiful exhibition at the Guggenheim Gallery on the third mind, American artists contemplate Asia. And one of the feature artists was Mark Tobey. It's an incredible, beautiful paintings of Mark Tobey. There's a bit written about him. But I found these notions kind of intriguing. What emerges is the history of how artists working in America
selectively adapted Eastern ideas and art forms to create not only new styles of art, but more importantly, a new definition of the contemplative experience and self-transformative role of art itself. From John Cage, this is also included in the exhibit. Experiential immediacy. We learn from Oriental thought that those divine influences are in fact the environment in which we are. Our business in living is to become fluent with the life we are living, and art can help this. I think that, again, is kind of describing in a eloquent way something of the invisible, intuitive aspect of where the power comes from. And all the arts, of course, but certainly my one being the painter is kind of helps us understand that there is a rationality, even if it isn't immediately obvious, perhaps. Some more examples of some of the art that we did in the couple of years that we were in Pelican. The family. I worked with a family, and again, I must say that sometimes when I worked in First Nations, especially the number of years that I worked in Connecticut, sometimes big communities as well, I often felt that I had gone to heaven. You know, I mean, life is hard. You know, and I was exhausted in the day, and I wasn't making $1 million. You know, driving around Vancouver Island. And there was a lot of real problems in terms of administration. But there was an incredible degree of freedom to just follow the spirit, if you like. And if you had an idea, people would be willing to try it out. And like I said, I work with whole families sometimes. We would just all sit down looking over the all toward Vancouver Island in Connecticut, and all be kind of, 6 people in the family would all be kind of working on Pascal. And then we would incorporate it sometimes in an exhibit. And a nice feeling. There's a stone in all of it. Sometimes we would, everyone would be happy to pack up their portable tables and easels, working flat. I taught them how to work flat. Work flat, and we would work from this incredible landscape. Me too. This is another one of my sketches in Pascal, it's one of my plants. It was always a lot of fun to get outside. And these are some more of the landscapes from the island. It's a beautiful rose, Pascal. So some of these images that I'm showing right now were done in Galahad. I mentioned before about the last half year or so, we carried out this project and did a workshop which both combined imagery and written material. So some really wonderful relationships were established, and some good talks and conversations, good humor, obviously. This is another ceremony that I participated in. I was just as an audience, one of the members of the audience in a gym in Penelope. This is another one of our exhibits. And so, actually, every year that I was there, the quality of the work even increased. I mean, I think it did. Just because everyone that I was working with became used to each other, and we found ways to support each other. Acrylic. This is my colleague that I worked with. As I said, she still is in Penelope. Everyone's welcome. Friends came over, and they knew that they could sit at the table too to do some art. A very good friend, and she moved from the adult learning center to teaching. I think she taught grade 6, and so I moved with her. Showing her group. This is elementary school. Portraits. Different themes. So the story of the name Penelope. The lungs have covered us sand. Beautiful. And one of the Addiction Awareness Week, we took everyone's art who wanted to contribute, and then we made a book and gave it to them at another meeting. So these are some of the booklets that we produced. So far, I haven't talked too much about addictions. I haven't talked too much about some of the theory. So I just wanted to mention that in terms of mental health, definitions and theories, from the First Nations perspective, one of the models that is written about in practice is this idea of a healing circle. and I know that you all know about it, is illnesses occur when there is imbalance in life, forces, and qualities, between the four directions, between the individual self and community, between physical, cognitive, emotional, and spiritual wellness. Art can actually work in this culture to reintegrate wholeness and health. This is from a First Nation holy man, Black Elk. Sometimes dreams are wiser than waking. The Great Spirit has many ways of communicating with the human being. He talks to us through the five senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. For example, we can observe nature and see a lesson or get an answer. These five senses function primarily in the physical world, but we also have the ability to receive communication from the unseen world. To do this, we have a sixth sense. It comes in the form of dreams, imagination, intuition, inspiration, or a hunch. Along with the dream or intuitive thought, there is a feeling, a knowing. We just know it's true without the need for proof. We need to pay attention to our dreams and intuition. Don't cast them off as being silly or useless. Be respectful to our dreams and feelings. And then there's this prayer. Creator, if you speak to me through dreams, let me know it in terms I can understand. There's so much more to say about First Nations models and learning, but I'm not an expert on the subject. I have had some practice, experience working First Nations communities, so I won't say too much more about that. But I did want to say a little bit about, not much, but just a little bit about some of the postmodern models that inform my work and still does. And some of the models are referred to as collaborative. One of the, Lynn Hoffman is someone that I met and actually think of as a friend. And she's one of the most eloquent writers about the development of collaborative approaches in family therapy. Michael White is no longer alive, unfortunately, but he is probably the person from Australia who developed what we think of as narrative therapy. And those ideas have really released and kind of transformed the way people think about working with group families. And it is applied to individual counseling and therapy as well. Another approach is called the collaborative language systems. And there's Harlene Anderson, who's still alive, very much alive. She lives in Houston, Texas, I believe, and I've worked and met with her several times, and she's a brilliant thinker about the collaborative language system that she and her partner established. Another individual who made contribution to this field of postmodern is a fellow by the name of Tom Anderson. And unfortunately, he passed away when he was 70. He lived to 2010. But he's a Scandinavian therapist, very brilliant, very, very spiritual man. And I've had the honor of attending a conference in the West Coast, I think it was 2008 or 9, the year before he passed away, and it was a wonderful experience. So I will read one brief thing from his work. Tom Anderson, he talked about therapy as a communal enterprise rather than an individual-oriented one. He talked about networks, talking to networks, about language as all expressions in the communal perspective, to talk, write, paint, dance, sing, point, cry, laugh, scream, hit, etc. in the presence of others. Language becomes a social activity. And there's many other writers. Another very brilliant philosopher who speaks for this community is someone by the name of John Schotter. And he came up with a term called witness thinking, a dynamic form of reflective interaction that involves coming into contact with another's living being, with their utterances, and with their bodily expressions, and with their words and their works. One of the other teachers for me in terms of my work is, and I met him first in 96, 5, I think. When I was just graduating, I went to the University of Northern BC in Prince George for a year to do my master's in counseling. And I went to a conference and in Toronto, and I just kind of checking it all. It was called a Therapeutic Conversations Conference. They just had one in Vancouver 3 weeks ago. But this one in Toronto, I was just listening to someone talk, and I never heard of this person before. His name is Dr. Stephen Gilligan, and I heard him speak, and I just was inspired. Hadn't read anything, he hadn't written or anything. But I went to his workshops, and I developed a relationship with him I think 2 or 3 years ago still. So he's like a person that I've kind of developed a long connection in terms of I think as artists or thinkers or physicians or whatever our discipline, we all need to pick. We need mentors, we need sources of inspiration. And so he's another great uncle for me, I guess, in terms of opening up possibilities to, is a model called self-relations. And he talks about that we have different dimensions to ourself. And his idea was that it's very similar to the healing circle, is that when these relations, self-relations, when these relationships become sundered by trauma or crisis, addictions, that we no longer have this connection, we become ill. So this model was a very, very beautiful model. And so I'm just mentioning, in one of his more recent books, he talks about, he calls it a generative trance, developing higher states of consciousness for transformational change. And he talks about integrating the two worlds results in a generative state of consciousness capable of creating new realities and transforming and healing existing realities. Some properties of this generative state, he calls it the subtle field of non-duality. 2, mindfulness, a kind of non-reactive self-awareness. 3, quantum superposition, in a kind of a humorous way, he calls it a field of infinite possibilities. 4, the free flow of information and energy. 5, aesthetic pleasure. 6, radical creativity, creating new futures, transformation, and healing. And finally, a metafield for classical forms, body of bodies, mind of minds, field of fields, and all of their permutations. Anyhow, like I said, it's another gifted, kind of like a genius who has taken some of his lessons that he knew from people like Milton Erickson was his teacher, and he's kind of taken it to another kind of level himself in terms of offering tools in our, because this is about tools. And it's another one of the wise teachers who's taught me. And I'm going to maybe stop talking. I haven't got into addictions and so on, but again, the postmodern idea is more, it focuses less on the specific, like a modernist idea was addiction is like pressure. And postmodernist idea is that it's a continuum, and that in some senses we all, Gabor Mate, I think, is a good example of someone who kind of exhibits that in his own writing and his own work. He works, first of all, he for 10 years he ran the Portland Hotel clinic for people who live in the Lower East Side on Granville, or not Granville, but on Hastings in Vancouver. And he wrote a book called In the Realm of the Hungry Ghost after working in a setting for 10 years. Actually, the people who were my clients in Kinnamach turned me on to that book, and it is a really good book. And I've met him and been to his workshops and so on, listening to his speak. Again, he wrote a book in a very humble way. He presents himself as someone who has an addiction. And it's a beautiful way. So he's sharing stories of other people and their struggles, but he includes himself in that theme as well. I don't think he was trying to be postmodern, but I think he achieved it just by seeing, taking that attitude of humility, making his, and he's also a wonderful example of a local example of a servant, someone who lives his life of, he's doing some beautiful things I heard on CBC last week. He and his son doing workshops on connection between the generations and healings between himself and his children. And they both talked on radio, and it's pretty moving. Okay, one other thing is we did manage, enjoyed, we made a book that just towards the end of my time with the Hilling Health, we kind of first primarily working in Malahat, where some of the writing was incorporated, and we called the book Using Arts to Heal. And these are some of the pictures and images of the actual art and some of the poetry and some photos. So again, I'll send these around.
I just wanted to know the difference between the first book that you passed around, which had the artwork and the poetry, and this last or second book.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I did introduce. The second book was produced most recently, and it just has a lot more detail, a lot more information. It is broken into the different, we mentioned specifically I think we called ourselves, we had a name for our group, and we didn't choose it, but it was called the Poetry Warriors. So our group created a name, and that's what that kind of detail is in the book that I shared most recently, and all the other developments that happened after the first book it was created. I don't think it was any more. It's just we grew as we learned. We grew, and we added more things, and the title. The cover was a painting by one of the participants of the group. Her son is grade 10, and that was art that he had made for his high school project. It was actual carving. It was beautiful. And so I asked if I could get permission to use it, and we incorporated it on the cover.
Being First Nations, was the art unpacked more as a group rather than individually?
No, there wasn't any rules about it. Obviously I was showing some of the images that were done by Jack in Penelope. He's very comfortable as an artist, and he generates his own image. But unless he wanted to have a conversation about it, my role is just to put out the paint, and make sure there was good coffee, and make sure what I'm saying is that I got there on time, and I was there to facilitate this and support it, and set everyone out in this bit. But I painted too. I had fun. I participated. I brought myself to work, and that's scary sometimes because you don't know whether yourself is good enough. But as far as I know, I only have one, so I've got to present it, and you try your best, and you learn. So that's kind of how I think about it. I learned a lot in that way too, because people did such amazing things, and that's why we were sharing is the art that I saw that puzzled me sometimes. It was very, very intriguing to see some of the art. The one fellow who, I don't know what the designation of autism or something, or some kind of condition, but all of his art was from another place. The soul was not affected by these mental conditions we're told. So it's true. I found that many times. And I'm a video.
A woman named Sharon wrote, "I just came from the House of Healing." And I love the way people who work with you must feel that they're certainly in a place of healing.
I just wonder how long did you work with each individual? How long did you work with individual, and how, excuse me, and did you see any progress?
Well, it's a very, very slow work, you know. Because of, now, of course, living in Vancouver for the last year and a half. Even after the work with Hilton came to an end, a lot of my work is so different, such a different model. You know, it's mostly EAP work, but also phone counseling. And so it's very, 1 hour. You have so many sessions, and it's very short-term counseling. So I have to adapt to those kind of realities. And so I found that sometimes if you only have an hour, then you do the best you can within an hour. And it's surprising how much one can do. If you have a bigger framework, then one adapts to that. So I think for me, and I worked in quite a few First Nations communities in northern BC. I worked for the mountain, and for 6 months I worked on a project in Masset. There was 2 art therapists. I'm not an art therapist, actually. I have a master's in studio art and I have a master's in counseling. So I don't promote myself as an art therapist, but I do art and I do therapy. Sometimes I guess they touch each other. But what the work was in Masset and on Queen Charlotte's is that there was a person who did have a master's in art therapy, and she worked in Skidegate, and I worked up north in Masset. And she worked in her way, and I worked in my way. And for me, I just approached it like a big experiment. And I just went there and I just explored. Again, it was finding relationships, finding brand new teachers in schools who they didn't know what to do with their students. They don't know how to teach them anything. And so I thought, well, let's use art. And so the two of us would come up with some ideas, and we would kind of, so I tried different things, and I also did things in the village and so on. I put exhibitions together. Sometimes I would go into an elementary school and I would sit down and work with a child for an hour. If it was younger, then it was more formal in that way. So I wasn't there long enough to be able to evaluate in a way to sort of say this is successful, this isn't successful. I just sort of moved very much in terms of fitting in as best I could. And then I worked for 2.5 years in Kitkatla, which is 350 people on an island, and I would fly in every week and spend 2.5 days in the village. And I do the same thing. I work with the schools, I work in the health center, and I tried to use the learning that I did, the learning about these, like I took this stuff when I first learned about Lynn Hoffman's work or Harding Anderson's and so on, these ideas are very, very exciting and fresh about focusing on the kind of communal context, So inviting everyone who there's a problem in the school or there's a problem with somebody, invite whoever wanted to come to be part of the solution. I couldn't predict it because you give control when you take those kinds of approaches. You just create an environment where people feel safe and where you encourage people to share their thoughts about the situation. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of kind of back and forth conversations and meeting with people and so on. But it just takes so much personal stress on your back, because instead of fixing everything, you're sharing the work. And for me, it takes such a long time to figure out how a community is working, let alone an individual or family. So, I've become more and more, maybe I'm getting lazier and lazier the older I get, so I'm just taking the easy way out. But I found that takes a lot of pressure off, is just to be very open to that.
My name is Ed Price. I came originally from Montreal, and my mother was 1/4 Mohawk, 1/4 Iroquois. Through that, I went right across Canada, when I lived in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That's probably about 32 years ago. We had all the chiefs. We had 8 chiefs all together in Saskatoon working on their BCom. Within about 2 months, they walked away. So we went back in January once again, and I said, look, we're dealing with the basics, with water, with the wood, and the river, and the wild rice at that time. Anyway, I'm going back there next year. We now have, at that time we had 1 MBA. We now have over 200 BComs in Saskatoon. We now have 78 MBAs in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I was just very part of it, and then I moved here to Vancouver Island. I lived in a place called Arbutus Ridge. I got involved with the Cowichan tribe. And within about 1 month, I knew every one of them, young and old. And we did all kinds of things together. But deep down, I said, let's talk about what's more than anything else is music, music, music. I've been a professional singer my entire life. So it's a combination of singing and dancing, 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 dancing. And through all of that, these people slowly but surely walked away from addict to drugs and alcohol. And here we are today. I'm an honorary chief of the Burrard Band, an honorary chief of the Squamish Band. And through all of that, as I go on, every time I live right over here, a block and a half from here, every time I walk through here, I see Native people. As I walk by, they say, hi, Ed, how are you? Can I sit down? I said, sure. If we talk for 10 minutes or half an hour, it's face to face. That works so much better. Thank you all very much.